Thanks for finding this podcast and welcome.
I'm Simon Murnau.
And I'm Nicky Blue.
What you're about to hear is a conversation between two friends who grew up in the 80s, discovering goth music and culture along the way.
We're going to be talking about the albums we love most from that era and how they fit into the stories of our lives at that time. It's not in any way objective or comprehensive.
We're also going to talk about what the goth and alternative scene meant to us and how it made us, in part, who we are today. This is a love letter, really, and a thank you to the goth scene and to all the people and ideas we found within it.
You know who you are. This is for you.
If you want to keep updated about this podcast and our upcoming book of the same name, please join our email list from the link in the bio.
Thank you for the darkness.
Born in the Black Cave.
Right, we're running.
Rolling.
Okay.
Hi.
Everything is recorded.
You right?
Okay, we're good.
You right, Stu?
Yeah, I'm very good. I'm here.
So this is Born in the Back Cave, final session. Whoever want to thank it.
Hang on, we're starting.
Yeah, we're starting.
All right, okay. All right, yeah, well, so here we are then. We have finally made it at last.
We've made it.
Week 10.
It's been a fucker of a year.
It has,
It's
indeed.
been a COVID Born in the Back Cave podcast series. And we're very, very happy to introduce to our final session the wonderful, the glorious, the magnificent, the beautiful Stuart Harper.
Hi, Stuart.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having long time listener, first time guest. Happy to be here.
It's an utter pleasure.
What your listeners may not know is I'm your unofficial fact checker.
This is right.
Unofficial, unpaid. Unfortunately, quite often fact checking happens after the fact, which is somewhat less useful. I do admit that. But
Well, when we record these sessions, we often do Simon and I either do a Zoom session or we get together in person and do a research session. And that research session is generally me contacting Stuart, asking for facts and dates and times. And what year did we go to that Fields of the Nephilim gig? Or what year was that Cure concert? And so we'll be doing more of that tonight as we go, as we talk.
yeah, of course,
Also,
quite often it's me pointing out afterwards that you got things wrong, which some people might call pedantry or just being a smart ass, actually.
Yeah, a little
Fact-checking.
bit of both, really. Yeah. And also complaining that like the albums we're discussing in this week don't strictly correspond with the year that we're talking about.
Yeah, well,
even though
It's
like
not even
strictly,
strictly.
even at the outset, we kind of like we put a disclaimer in there that they're not all going to correspond. But there you go.
There we go.
There's always one.
Nothing's perfect,
Always
is there?
one. Yeah. Okay, so what we're going to do this week then for our final week is not entirely lose the format of the week. So we've still got a particular album that myself and Nick are going to talk about and a bit of personal story. But what we also want to do then is to bring in Stuart and ask him a bit about his story and how it fits into the story of our growing up and Nick's band and this important decade that we talked about.
Yeah.
And then we're going to have a talk about what happened in the 90s with goth and alternative. And Stuart has some particular personal insights and first-hand experience of that. So that's the format of this week.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to jump in with albums first. Is that right, Nick?
Yeah, I'm going to start with an album called Wings of Joy by Cranes. And Simon is correct to pick me up on the fact that I've been calling them the Cranes, and there's no article. But I feel that there should be an article.
Well, I mean, that's just clinging, really, isn't it? In the Buddhist context, it's sort of clinging to views, which is not consonant with reality.
I completely
Does there have to be an article?
Well, I completely concede and I agree, and it's nice that you brought that up because there's going to be a Buddhist theme.
Okay. I mean, I do actually in my to criticise myself, I do often say the Cocteau Twins, which I believe they are just Cocteau Twins.
Yes, no article either. And again, that's relevant. So the Cranes album came out in 1991. It was stuck to my turntable. It came out, 1991 on a small indie label called Dedicated Records. That was shared by a band that I used to like and I saw a couple of times called Spaceman 3. Now, I went to see them with you, Stuart, and maybe you can tell us when we went to see them and who they were supporting.
I'm glad you asked that, Nick. Let me just check my records here. Just a moment.
Your encyclopedia.
Wow.
We saw them supporting Love and Rockets, Nick, at the Dominion Theatre. It was 19th of June 1988. £6.50 to get in. What a bargain!
Wow. Is that a scrapbook of tickets you've got?
It is.
There,
It is
Stuart?
encyclopedic.
Oh, my Lord.
Every single gig that I went to, which is somewhat sad, but it's very, very
fantastic.
useful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
did
no,
you
that's
did you
brilliant.
compile this throughout the years, or this is something you did later on in life?
No, I've always kept them, and I've just kind of stuck them in an album.
Because you never
I think
told me that you never
I
told
think
people
it's-
that you were keeping that.
Well, I think it's my dreadful memory means that I have to kind of record these things with photographs and
Well,
other memorabilia.
I tell you one thing, Stuart. If you and your wife Fiona have a dreadful memory, then I am completely fucked. So Cranes originate from along the coast in Portsmouth. They formed in 1985 by a sister and brother combo, Alison and Jim Shaw. They took their name, which is a kind of nice imagery, I think, from the numerous cranes around the city docks in Portsmouth. They first came into my radar when they toured with The Cure. They did a series of gigs with the tour, and it took an instant shine to them because they instantly, for me, had a sort of a hint of Cocteau Twins or Dead Can Dance, or at least they had a similar sort of haunting, ethereal melody about them that evoked similar feelings in me. And so this was later on where there weren't many new goth bands emerging. So, it may be debatable whether you can call them pure goth, but they definitely had that edge or that feeling to them. So this was an album like with Dead Can Dance that I used to listen to on my nights out. Sorry, my nights in, when I just lie on my bed with a glass of wine and letting the discordant rhythms cover my body in goosebumps.
Goosebumps. Is that an Amy Winehouse track? Goosebumps.
Sorry, I've had 2 beers and a little bit of wine, so I'm celebrating this. It's our last podcast.
Okay,
So I'm a
okay.
little bit drunk now.
And like we're about 10 minutes in, and you're like this. I mean, what's it
pissed.
going to be like after half an
It's going to
hour?
be mayhem. Okay, so Goosebumps. Thank you for correcting me. So interestingly, this is going back to the Buddhist theme. The Cranes' first release, which was a limited run, it's sort of like a mini self-release, was called Self Non-Self, which was a title that was almost certainly taken from the Buddhist concept of anicca, which is the idea of not self. And I'll be talking about that when I go back to university in my personal story.
Did you tell us what year this album is?
Yes, 1991.
Wings of Joy, 91.
So
Okay.
this is the year previous to the year we're talking about, which is 1992.
Yes, yeah.
Which is pretty
So-
close for you guys. I mean, that's
pretty-
that's what's bang on.
It's all right, isn't it? Yeah.
It's pretty damn good.
Well, I'm going to be doing Nico from the 60s today, so I'm going to more than compensate.
There's usually about a 15-year spread on yours, Simon.
There you go. So what's your memories of, do you have any memories of Cranes?
Well, perhaps this is something that our archivist and general memory guy can help us with, because I saw Cranes. I said earlier before this recording that I had never seen them, but I realised I had seen them at the Marquee.
Oh.
I'm just wondering if it's the same gig we were talking about last week or the week before, where you played the Marquee was that 1990 or 91? In fact, it was 91, wasn't it?
I don't think we played with them.
We didn't play with the Cranes.
No.
Okay, so I saw Cranes then at the Marquee, and I was absolutely bowled over by them because, I mean, they felt pure goth for me, particularly on their first album, because they had that monotonous, dark, reverb-drenched, almost sort of abstract feel to their tracks. They, if memory serves, they didn't have particularly strong riffs at this time. They had like a sort of lonely piano would come in, and then the track would sort of build, and it would be like a single chord structure that would repeat, and then what's the lead singer's name? Alison
Shaw.
Alison Shaw, yeah, had this sort of vocal sound like a sort of suffering baby.
Yes.
In a cavernous room.
Yes.
And live, it was astonishing. You know, when her sort of squeaky voice came in, it was chilling.
Yeah.
And with the sort of, you know, heavy, sort of crashing, slow drums that just sort of seemed to sort of drive through the track. Live, it was just astonishing. And at the end of it, I was so taken with the band, they scribbled what must have been one of the world's worst poems on a little piece of paper. And I knocked on the dressing room door.
Oh, wow.
And Alison Shaw opened the door.
Oh, wow.
And I thrust it into her hand and ran away.
Oh, really? Yes. Oh, wow. You should have had your phone number on it. You could have pulled.
I think she had a look on her face of sort of like pity and pity and embarrassment. So
Right.
I'm embarrassed for you.
Oh, bless you.
So yeah,
That's quite a reveal.
I can remember as I ran away thinking, I wish I hadn't done that.
Yeah. But the things we do in our 20s, hey.
But anyway, yeah, I loved Cranes, particularly on this first album, and then their second album, I think, was called Forever, where they became a lot lighter. They used acoustic guitars, but I loved the album because it was more melodic. And Robert Smith actually did a remix of one of the big singles, which I think is just called Jewel.
Yeah.
And I loved that remix. It was kind of Robert Smith by numbers. He did the whole sort of Disintegration sort of Robert Smith riff over the top of it, and even the sort of jangly bells that come in and out all through Disintegration. But yeah, that's how I remember Cranes.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I mean, so for me, you know, the opening track on Wings of Joy is Cold Water. It's sort of an atmospheric and chilling with all, and sort of the Alison Shaw's kind of almost like fey, childlike vocal style, and then sort of therein lies this distinctive sound of the band, really, this sort of dingy, haunting grunge of the music and a soft childlike dance, the vocals on top. It's a sort of a blend of bleak acoustic and dark grinding electric. Which you could put your money on it not working, but it really does work in this case. And there's sort of precedents for it around the sort of time. I'm sort of thinking of a band called Daisy Chainsaw that was similar, actually. Can you remember when Daisy Chainsaw were around, Stu?
No, but it would have been that time, I'm sure.
That sort of time, wouldn't it? They had these sort of like crashing loud guitars and this kind of like dainty little kind of fey voice on the top of it. So I think there were a few bands that were doing a similar thing.
And that's what I remember about the Cranes, was just this kind of gigantic guitar sound.
Yeah.
Huge reverb.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be talking about three of their songs. So that opening one was the Cold Water opening song to the album. Star Blood was another one of my favourite songs from the album, which had this sort of backdrop of dull thudding drums, which sort of discordant drums, sort of like it was sort of almost, it was uneasy to listen to. It almost made you want to stop listening to it until Alison's voice enters the fray, kind of riding on this cascade of wave of dirty guitars. And the sort of sound is not uniform, but they seem quite happy with the songs being unpredictable and almost uneasy to listen to, almost mantra-like. And this is my summary, like a bastard punk mantra for the dispossessed.
I like that. I mean, that should be like a single line, just sort of testimonial on the back of the album.
There you go. Thank you. I'm glad I was quite pleased with that.
Yeah, can you repeat that? A bastard?
It's a bastard punk mantra for the dispossessed.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Nice. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll put a bit of work into that.
Yeah.
And so, leading on to the third track of the album that I love, which is the single of the album, which is Tomorrow's Tears. Slightly different, as a bit more commercial. In that it had more of a standard melodic structure and framework. But despite this, it sort of kept that twisted edge and discordant feeling. And this must have been one of my favourite songs over the next few years. It was haunting, resonant. I had no clue as to what it means, but I'm not really interested in what it means, in the same way that I don't understand what Cocteau Twins really mean, or a lot of Deccan dance songs. Or it's just what it felt like, and it filled me with a shudder. with a hope and despair and smothered me with goosebumps. I challenge anyone not to be moved by this song.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think they had. I don't think Alison Shaw had a massive investment in her lyrics being heard.
Yeah.
Because they were drenched in reverb, and they were often mixed. I think, particularly on that first album, mixed quite far back into the track, so that what you had was this atmosphere rather than a song that was about this or that.
Sure. Yeah.
So, like a lot of goth and alternative, I feel it was sort of the mood, the emotional space that the song opened up that was more important than grabbing every lyric and sort of, and
having some deep sort of
decoding the lyric and understanding what the song was about.
Yeah.
In a sense, like, if I can bring in Gertrude Stein here, a rose is a rose is a rose. The song was about what the song actually was, the experience of listening to the song.
Yeah.
That's what the song was about. It didn't need to be about this other reference. Didn't have to have a signified. It was the signifier of its own experience.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of where I've come from throughout the entirety of this podcast.
Is that right? Yeah.
Is that I'm kind of talking about how these songs affected me when I was in my 20s.
Yes.
Which is very much experiential.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It was the spaces they opened up inside of us that was important.
Yeah.
Not an abstract or sort of academic understanding of what the song was about.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly that. So that's Cranes.
That's Cranes.
Without an article.
Yeah.
And we can move on to your album if you like. So I was just talking about
your arse.
Tomorrow. My arse or knickers. Tomorrow's Tears by the Cranes. That it makes me shudder. It fills me with hope and despair. Smothers me in goosebumps. And I challenge anyone on the face of this earth that we live on not to be moved by it.
Yeah. Well, it's, I'm tearing up just hearing you wax lyrical about it. And I do remember that moment of shoving my terrible little poem into Alison Shaw's hand.
Yeah.
So thank you for kind of reviving that memory.
I'm sure she remembers it as well.
I doubt that very much.
Well, you never know. Sounds like a big humiliation. Anyway, let's move on to your album.
To my album, yes. Okay. I should just say that we are having a few issues because we have the added complication of Stuart on Zoom this week. And so I was going to say something really entertaining about that. So insert that here because I've forgotten it.
Oh, God.
Right. So, that's what I was going to say. This is a podcast version of shitposting, right? Which means it's like really authentic and cottage industry and people love it. So,
okay. All right. There you go.
You've got to have
the crappier it is, the better. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. The crappier it is, the sort of more kudos it has, the more real it is.
It's
the
a
more
shit show.
The more
in
real.
that case, we're well on track then. Excellent.
Yeah,
this is a podcast shit show, basically.
Let's continue with our shit posting.
Yeah.
Okay, so Nico, I'm going to be doing the Marble Index 1969 album, and I have to give a shout out to our friend Richard, who suggested this. About halfway through the podcast, he said, "What? You're not doing Nico?"
Yes.
And he put me onto this quotation from Mr. Pete Murphy of Bauhaus fame, OBS. And Pete Murphy said, Nico recorded the first truly gothic album, The Marble Index. Nico was gothic, but she was Mary Shelley to everyone else's Hammer horror. They both did Frankenstein, but Nico's was real.
Wow.
And that is from the book The Dark Reign of Gothic Horror, Dave Thompson, 2002. See, Richard's such a good academic that even gave me the reference to the quotation.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Richard Gilpin.
It might be the right time for me to just jump in with my little thought on that. Actually,
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I found myself disappearing down a kind of YouTube wormhole not too long ago, actually, in preparation for this, and it was. There was a documentary that someone had put together around the origins of goth.
Yes.
It was quite striking because it had picked up on quite a number of the themes that you guys had also picked up on.
Yes.
And bands like The Doors having an influence there. But in particular, they picked out Nico and specifically this album from Nico. And they referred to her as the kind of the original queen of goth.
Yes.
So that kind of, I think, supports the point that Richard was making there as well.
Yeah. And that might actually be the same video that in like the third or fourth episode that we had cottoned onto and we talked about a little bit, because it was great. Did it have Dead Babies by Alice Cooper in that video?
Yes,
Stuart?
it did. Yes, it did. Yes.
Yeah, same video. Yeah, we've already recommended that. That was
Yeah.
absolutely great. Really well researched, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay, the Marble Index, 1969 on Elektra Records. So that quotation and what Stuart just said there, it points to Nico and the Marble Index as an album that every goth or alternative music fan must confront. And even if they don't like it, nonetheless, they have to acknowledge its stature and its place in the vanguard of the gothic in popular music. So there wasn't a female vocalist before her that composed her own songs, that recorded and performed them in such an uncompromising or utterly serious and unapologetic way. At least not that I know of. And if any of the listeners or viewers know, then I'd like to hear about it. So there's so much to say about this album. I could, spend an hour talking about it, but I'm just going to try and boil it down. So her lyrics are interesting. She used archaic words like reverie and slumber, and you feel like you're hearing lines from the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam or some piece of Renaissance verse, or lines from an old translated heroic epic, such as the great German epic, The Lay of the Nibelungen, which Wagner infamously picked up on, and for which she takes a song title for the Marble Index. Well, in fact, it's an extra track from the session, not included on the album, but it's on the 1990 reissue that I have. So there's a formality in her lyrics, a coldness and a seriousness that has no trace of irony and humour in it. And I think it's part of that which gives her this sense that she is a serious Gothic artist. Sisters and Mission and quite a lot of the artists, Specimen, I remember you talking about, they had a sense of humour, which is great. Irony is great. But there are some artists like Dead Can Dance and like Nico that they just eradicate all irony from their stuff, and it's absolutely, some might say deadpan and po-faced, but it's completely serious in its intent.
Yeah, less Hammer House.
Yeah. So a lot of the songs are written in the third person, or they include unpeopled landscapes and scenes, and this gives them a loneliness but also a grandeur. Sometimes there are objects or forces acting upon the speaker in ways that make the speaker seem to be small or at the mercy of an indifferent universe. So I'm not allowed to quote very much, but a couple of snippets here, a few lines. Frozen warnings close to mine, close to the frozen borderline. Exactly what we're talking about here, you don't know, but you can see how this sort of third person, close to mine is not third person, but you have this sort of sense of these frozen warnings. What are they? Midnight winds are landing at the end of time. That's purely third person. A true story wants to be mine. Mandolins are ringing to his fire singing. And last one, dungeons sink into a slumber till the end of time. This is a feeling of being in this sort of cavernous, cold world. So musically, there hadn't been anything like it before, at least not in the rock or the pop world. There's no drums, virtually no electric guitars, there's chamber string arrangements, Nico's own monotonous playing on a harmonium, and the harmonium cycles and hovers like a phantom, and there's treated piano, melodic percussion, and what sounds like a shimmering dulcimer or cymbalom echoing endlessly, overlaying itself until its multiplications become almost unbearable. So John Cale, who she met through the Velvet Underground, arranged the album, and together they're the perfect match. Nico never made a better album, and Cale produced timeless arrangements for Nico on this album that he never bettered anywhere else in his long career. So it's a disconsolate, fatalistic, heartbroken album. It's one of disconnection and ennui, but it's also unforgettable. It's glacial in its beauty, and it's absolutely untouched by time. It could have been recorded yesterday. While other artists and albums might seem to be married to their historical moment. They're preserved in amber. The marble index feels ageless. It's perfect in its sheer, chilling, crystalline originality. So just to finish by saying that Nico's influence can be heard far and wide. Dead Can Dance are surely influenced, and Suze's low singing register echoes Nico's. I'm sure Kate Bush must have been familiar with her, and more recently, Bat for Lashes certainly draws some influence, especially in some of the medievalist style lyrics that she uses on the Two Sons album in particular. So, contemporary artists like Agnes Obel, and in particular Soap and Skin, offer up clear echoes. Soap and Skin is the performing name of Anja Plaschke, if I'm pronouncing that right. She's an Austrian singer-songwriter. She played Nico in a 2008 play in Berlin and Vienna, and she also performed several Nico songs, one of which, Janitor of Lunacy, appeared on her first EP. So if you've not heard of Soap and Skin before, seek her out. She's got an astonishing voice, a weird way with lyrics, and a very uncompromising sense of hard-edged misery. Though is often the case, her newer stuff sounds like she's cheering up. Just to finish, it comes to all of us. As the great miserable one said, our Lord Leonard Cohen, who has since passed on from this earthly realm, he said, even damnation is poisoned with rainbows.
Wow.
Beautiful.
I shall leave you with that. So that's my sprint through Nico's Marble Index.
Awesome.
I'd love to say more about it than that, but we've got a lot to pack in today.
We'll say more about it in our forthcoming book.
The forthcoming book of the same name,
Yeah.
Born in the Batcave.
Yeah.
Will that just have like a massive picture of the Cure tattoo on your arse on the cover? Do you think?
Nick, have you got a tattoo on your arse?
I have. But actually, it says cult now. I am aware that this is our last podcast, and that I did promise at some point, I'm sure, that I would get my arse out and show.
Was it a promise? Was it a promise? Was it more of a threat?
Threat, yeah, maybe a threat. So we'll have to see if that's going to happen or not. There has been some debate before this started whether I should do it or not. But I'm not going to, just to let you know that the viewers and listeners, that I'm not going to listen to Stuart or Simon on this. I'm going to make my own decision. I'm an autonomous male, and I am fully in control of myself, although I am a little bit drunk, I have to say. So the chances are I will get my arse out. That's how it sounds at the moment.
Sort of foreshadowed that a little, haven't you?
Yeah. The chances are my arse is going to be on video.
Yeah, okay.
We'll see. Obviously, that's not, as Simon pointed out, that's not good podcast, but it will come out on YouTube.
I think I'll take the wine away now.
Okay, so that takes us.
A great arse for radio.
There we go. So that segues nicely into my life events. So this is 1992. It's a new beginning for me. I'd left London, and I felt very burnt out by the party scene and the sort of hedonism and the sleeping around, and all of that sort of it was fun at times, but kind of left me feeling a bit shallow.
You were washed up at 23, were you?
How old was I? 23?
23, yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, I've been leading a life of hedonism since
you were 3.
Almost. Like teens anyway,
Yeah.
And however fun hedonism is, it can leave you feeling quite empty inside,
Yeah.
And I remember feeling very empty by the end of the time we left London, and also very upset that the band Fellow to See that was in with Stuart had split up, because our guitarist Simon Manning, our dear friend Simon Manning, that's no longer with us, had left, gone back to Hastings on the south coast of England, and formed Children on Stun, of which Stuart will be saying a bit more about in a minute. And so basically the reason Simon did that was that he was a lifelong goth, refused to be anything other than a lifetime goth, was unashamedly a lifetime goth, and left to become and carry on being a lifetime goth.
Okay.
And because basically we'd gone in the direction that we felt that was in fitting with the times, that was moving away from goth.
Yeah.
And he was unhappy about that.
Yeah.
So anyway, the band split up. So this sort of corresponded with me wanting a sort of a determined change in my lifestyle, and so I'd gone off in 1991 to do an access course, which is an access course, for anyone that doesn't know, it's for someone that flunked out of college or flunked out of school without enough qualifications. You could go back and do this access course, and it could be to get you back into university. And I managed to get myself a place in university, Hertfordshire University, studying humanities, which I specialised in philosophy and English literature. And so I'm very, very determined to change my lifestyle, to move away from the hedonism and the rock and roll lifestyle that I've been living, which is why it only took me about 3 weeks to start up a new band when I was in university. And that was comprised of the handful of alternative people that I met in my new university. And of course, we stuck together like glue. And the band we called Quad Piece. It was four of us.
Quad piece.
Well, we called ourselves, this was our symbol, it was like quad piece. So there was four of us.
Right.
And it was peace.
Right.
But it was a play on words. You can see what we did there.
Yeah. Did you all were you sort of naked apart from a cod piece with the number 4 on it?
No, well, we should have.
You should have done that. That would have been quite good.
That would have been a bit of quality banter.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we kind of like, we just played at college to start with, and we were a bit more sort of post-punks, a bit more buzzcocks than anything that I'd done previously, anything more sort of dark or gothic. So that was amazing fun. We really, really enjoyed it, and we played a few gigs at the Marquee. I think you came to one in the Marquee, didn't you, Stu?
Yes, I think so. My memory's hazy, but I'm pretty sure I did.
Flashing lights. If you can remember being there, you weren't really there, man. And so that was all really, really good fun. But the downside of that is that I developed tinnitus at the end of Fellow to Sea, the band I was in, and not wanting to stop music or not being able to stop music, carried on in this very loud sort of post-punk band, and this completely finished off my hearing, really. And I came out of university and finishing the band with a very chronic tinnitus that I went on to suffer with a great deal after leaving university, and it actually morphed into phonophobia, sort of fear of noise, and a sort of fear that it would make me go deaf, that noise would make me go deaf, which I had to have a course of CBT to overcome, which was a very, very difficult post-university period for me. But I found studying philosophy very illuminating, learning the value systems and the frameworks of all the great thinkers that come before us, and opened up new avenues to me, and none more so than studying existentialism, which took me into Eastern philosophy, and particularly Buddhism, which then became a very important philosophy in my life. And one that I would spend the next 15 years traveling to India, going on meditation retreats, spending as much time on the cushion meditating as I possibly could, which was a great benefit to me, particularly because of the difficulties I had with tinnitus. So really, the changes that I had coming out of London were really sort of encapsulated coming out of university. So this was around the age of 27, and I'd really laid a sort of rock and roll hedonism down to rest by then, and I went on this spiritual journey following university, and that's sort of the end of my sort of goth kind of rock and roll sort of band adventures, really, that ended in 1992. Well, ended in 1995, but I went back to university in 1992. And
yeah. Well, I remember walking through one of the lovely marshland fields of Hastings, chatting with you about philosophy and the finger pointing to the moon and Buddhism. So you'd already sort of embarked on that journey of Buddhism and spirituality, and I can remember having those discussions, walking through that field, and it's just a special memory. And I can remember opening up something in me and thinking, well, actually, there's got to be something valuable in this. There's a path to be
to be walked along here to learn more about this stuff.
And now you're a Buddhist Mitra.
I am a Mitra in the Triratna Buddhist tradition, which is not particularly scary or deep commitment, but I meditate and I study the Dharma and get enormous amounts out of it. And some days I wish I was more of a serious practitioner, but hey,
it's not easy. It's
I'm
simple,
a committed
but not
amateur.
Easy. There you go.
That's great. That's really good to hear about that. So I'm going to launch into my story for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to bring in Stuart, good and proper. Last week I talked about finishing my degree, and achieving a first meant that I had a good chance of getting a grant to go on and study for an MA. And sure enough, I got myself a place at Queen Mary in Westfield, part of University of London. And after a summer of mostly bumming around and reading, I moved to Hackney Wick in the autumn of 1992. And I happened to move in with our good friend and joining us today, Stuart, and his partner Fiona, in the house they'd bought in a place called Lee Bank Square. So I was still with my partner, but she was now living in Hastings. And to be honest, our relationship at a distance suited me well. But it was not conducive to mending or deepening it, for sure. In fact, living apart and studying for an MA, which I hoped would lead to a PhD and a life in academia, was the beginning of a trajectory that would take me away from her, onward toward Cambridge and a future without her. It took me a long time to admit it, but this was what I wanted. We weren't enriching each other's lives, though we were still attached, very attached to each other. So I continued to immerse myself in Freud, Lacan, Gothic literature like Dracula and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, all sorts of exciting stuff. I studied with the great academic luminary Lisa Jardine, and I had the best time writing essays on Sylvia Plath, Blake, psychoanalysis, and something called the materiality of language, as I recall my dissertation being about. Musically, I still loved a lot of goth and alternative, but I could feel my tastes widening, and I knew that the music I wanted to make, while it was always going to be tinged with melancholy, it wasn't going to be goth, not really. I teamed up with Stuart, which made practicing very convenient, and we also recruited a very intense but gifted bass player called Mark. And I would have quite a deep connection with him for some years, though I'm sorry to say I lost touch with him not long after coming down with ME in 1997. So Stuart, Mark and myself, we went through several band names. I could never quite find a name that stuck. And we played some fairly decent venues around London for a year, maybe two, something like that. So in a nutshell, I did well in my MA and I managed to secure a grant for a PhD in Cambridge, though only after being turned down on my first try and spending a very anxious lost year. So I thought of myself as destined for great academic and maybe artistic things. But I know now that in part, this was a defensive fantasy. It was stopping me from having to confront the truth that I felt too stressed by other people, particularly in professional environments, to be able to work at a conventional job. I clung to Samuel Beckett's statement about himself that writing was for him the last refuge of an unemployable man. Perhaps I could find the same refuge and make a living out of it. Alas, after my MA and after 2 years of studying in Cambridge, I would eventually succumb in 97 to a physical crash that became ME and a long-term fatigue that still squats over me with its leaden wings today. So in 92, so 92 was a watershed year in the sense that I felt it was possible after proving myself in my degree to plan a route towards an academic career. So it was a destination year then, and it was also a year of embarkation. I arrived at QMW University filled with excitement and anticipation, and I set out in earnest on a path of study, thought, and writing that's led me along many highways and byways. And although I can't say I've scaled any heights of achievement or earned myself a fortune, I can at least say that I've no regrets about the passions that I've pursued, the friends I've met, or the love of language, writing, and music that still lights up my spirit, and will keep on doing so until my spirit shuffles off this mortal coil. So I'd just like to add that I'm still recording music, and if you search SoundCloud for yet another name, Murnau in Silver, then you'll find me. I'm nearing completing an album, and I'll be pushing that online in the new year. So that's me. Just one last memory. I remember cycling from Hackney Wick into East London, where QNW University was, and I would go past Rachel Whiteread's house that won the Turner Prize, and it must have been 92, 93. And Rachel Whiteread created these sort of sculptural casts, and in the house she poured concrete into a derelict house, and then she removed the outside of the house. So what you had was a cast of the inner space of the house, but not the shell of the house anymore.
I remember that really, really well.
That was near Mile End. That's right,
okay.
Mile End.
Well, I remember that really, really well because it kind of corresponded with me making friends with another friend that you met that you had some difficulties with, who's a performance artist.
Oh yes.
Which
yes, let's not go there.
Yeah, and around what is art.
What is art?
And what was interesting about that piece that you spoke about, is that it just kind of just brought up issues around what is art, who says what art is.
Oh yes.
And is art only something for those that are schooled in the theory and the knowledge of art?
Yeah.
You know, so for someone that has absolutely no education in what that piece is trying to say, is it going to move them?
Yeah.
Does art transform people regardless of knowledge?
Mm. Mm.
And I felt no.
I see. I'm going to sidestep that because that's such a huge discussion.
I know.
It's such a huge discussion.
But that house was the pinnacle of many discussions I had at that point.
Yes.
Which is why I brought it up.
Yeah. I mean,
but maybe for next time.
I think you can argue both positions.
Yeah.
You do need cultural context for art to make sense of it, but I still also think that some, possibly all art, has the power to move you, even if you don't have an education or have thought that much about art. That's the end of part 1. If you want to hear the conclusion to this week's conversation, head on over to part 2.
Yeah.